Dementia Joe is raging with seething red-hot anger behind the scenes, and we're going to tell you all about it. Plus, the left is rewriting the Gospels before our very eyes, and we're not going to let them get away with it. And did you hear about that mass shooter down at Joel Osteen's church in Houston? No, you didn't, and we're going to tell you exactly why you didn't. Hey, we're live on Rumble. It's time to get going, so let's do it. That's right. We are live on Rumble today. It's our debut now at noon, and we'll be here daily. So make sure you bookmark us and subscribe and like and check back. And hello to all of our new viewers on Rumble live. And if you're watching us after the fact on that other video platform or on all the town hall sites or town hall social media platforms, well, make sure you circle back and check in live with us every single day at noon on Rumble. We're looking forward to it. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry, and let's get going. President Joe Biden raging with a blazing fire of a million suns behind the scenes, apparently. You ever notice they all tell us how great and competent and with it and lucid Joe Biden is behind the scenes, and yet you and I, we never actually get to see that Joe Biden in real life. Well, CNN gave us the story over the weekend, and it's worth noting not only about his temper, his raging behind the scenes, but also who he's directing that rage at.
Fury behind closed doors. We have new details this morning about President Biden's angry reaction in a private meeting after the special counsel's report exonerated him of legal wrongdoing, but then put in the report that he wouldn't be charged because he's an elderly man with memory issues. The special counsel wrote on Biden's diminished faculties and memory, and even went on to say that he didn't remember, even within several years, when his son Beau died. The president was livid about this, reportedly, and in a meeting with Democrats in Virginia, lashed out, saying, "How could I effing forget that?" CNN's Caitlin Polantz is following all of the details for us. Caitlin, we saw his emotional response to all of this. And then you have this report that came out that exonerated him, but then threw in this barb about his memory. What else came out in this report?
So a couple quick things here. We need to fact check as we go here, CNN. First of all, who is this reporter? She's having trouble sort of reading the teleprompter. I always get nervous when a broadcast journalist is having trouble literally reading words 5 feet away from them. By the way, just so you know, we don't use a teleprompter here on this show. You're seeing us raw and live. Also, did you hear what she just said? That report that exonerated Joe Biden, the report did not exonerate Joe Biden. Can I be clear with you, please? Don't let your liberal brother-in-law on your Facebook page get away with this crap, or the lib 2 cubicles down from you in the office or hanging out at the coffee machine. Don't let anybody get away with that. Joe Biden was not exonerated by the special prosecutor's report. In fact, he was implicated in the special prosecutor's report. He just got off because the special prosecutor, Mr. Hurd, decided that he was too senile to stand trial, that no jury in the world would convict the dude. That's all. But this tossing around the word exonerated is absolute bull. And we're not going to let him get away with it either. That said, let's get to the raging behind the scenes part.
Well, Sarah, we learned about an episode where Joe Biden did willfully retain and disclose classified materials. That is a core finding of the special counsel report, even though Joe Biden was not going to be charged and is not going to be charged as a sitting president, or even if he were to be a private citizen and not the president of the United States right now. That finding primarily was based around Joe Biden's conversations with his ghostwriter in 2017, that he had handwritten notebooks still in his possession in his private residence. He told the ghostwriter he found all the classified documents downstairs, or found all the classified stuff downstairs. He had kept information from his time as vice president about Afghanistan, the military, foreign policy, and that was something that the ghostwriter should not have been privy to, or that Joe Biden should have had after he left the vice presidency. Now, part of the reasoning that we saw that he is not being charged is The special counsel found this wasn't a triable case before a jury, and putting in writing that damning assessment, really, politically, saying at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Sarah, you don't usually see assessments like that from a prosecutor in writing, but you do here because we have the special counsel report in the hands of Congress.
That's right. And also, you don't usually see it because a special prosecutor, most prosecutors out there, set aside the word special, but prosecutors generally don't deliver reports explaining why they don't press charges. If they don't press charges, they just don't press charges, and you walk away. You don't have to put out a 300-page report explaining exactly the crimes that you discovered and why you're not pressing charges. So he was obliged to explain why he was treating Joe Biden different than, say, Donald Trump. And the reason is a scandal. The reason is that we have an incompetent president. And by the way, the secondary scandal, which also deserves some attention, is the fact that this prosecutor acknowledged the fact that in D.C., the system is rigged. The jury pool in the District of Columbia is drawing from people who 90%, 95% votes Democrat. So they all like Joe Biden. They're not going to convict him, but you try being a Republican in Washington, D.C., facing federal charges, you're going to jail. Even if there's no evidence, you're going to jail because of the D.C. jury pool. You can't get a fair trial here. But this whole idea of him raging behind the scenes is critically important to acknowledge, because right after that meeting where he goes in and starts throwing the F-bomb around, how could I effing forget that? It's my son, Beau. Then some genius decided to send Joe Biden out there in front of reporters. And let's not forget what that looked like.
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, watch me. Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
Look at it. He's shouting her down and he's pointing at her. And that is your dad. Also, did anybody notice that he made, everyone's talking about how he mistaked Egypt for Mexico. But right there, that's your judgment. That's not the judgment of the press. Dude, she is the press. What are you talking about? Well, clearly what he meant was that's not the judgment of the American people, right? I mean, out of all of the mistakes he made that night in his white-hot rage, that's just one of them. It hasn't gotten as much attention, but it's just as imbecilic. But again, the attitude with the finger pointing. And by the way, Mr. President, it is the opinion of the American people. 80% of the American people think that he's not capable of doing the job. Then at that same press conference, still with the memory of this, how would I effing forget when my son died? He raised that issue, and you can see the seething rage gritted through his teeth.
In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of.
All right, never mind the fact that he didn't remember the name of the church. It's Our Lady of Guadalupe, by the way, where his son, Beau, who, of course, he could never possibly forget anything associated with his death, except he forgot the name of the church where he got the rosary. And then this whole idea, I thought to myself, how dare he raise that? We all know who raised it. He raised it. I guarantee you we're not going to see the transcripts. They're never going to let us see the transcripts until 20 years after Joe Biden dies. But I guarantee you, when he was pressed about why he did this and why he did that and why he did this, he threw out there, well, my son just died. My son, Beau, just died. And so, I was really shook up about it and I was still reeling. So I can't be held accountable. He uses it all the time. He constantly raises the death of his son. He lies about it, too, claiming that he died in combat in Iraq. I mean, you can say, wow, hey, Mr. President, it's a nice day out today. Look at that blue sky. Yeah, it reminds me of the day my son died. He was a combat death in Iraq. Right? I mean, he does it all the time. And I guarantee you, he was probably, befuddled by the questions of the special prosecutor. So he did what he always does. He raised the death of Bo to try to deflect. And maybe one of the prosecutors said, well, Mr. President, what we're talking about here is something that happened in 2008. Now, what year did your son die? I don't know. Now, when did Bo die? Right? That's what happened here. And now he's feigning outrage. How dare he? How dare he raise the death of your son? How dare you raise the death of your son at every turn? But you know what Democrats do? They don't let a good opportunity go to waste or a horrible situation go to waste. And we saw that with the Bidens over the weekend. Jill Biden, she's a doctor, you know. Jill Biden put out a fundraising letter on this thing and specifically raised the issue of Bo Biden. I hope you can imagine how it felt to read that attack, not just as Joe's wife, but as Bo's mother. I mean, just a point of clarification. Technically, Dr. Jill is Bo's stepmother. Now, listen, I'm in a mixed family. My wife is my children's stepmother. And generally speaking, they constantly refer to each other in that tense. You know, it's the appropriate factual way to do it. That doesn't mean that my children's stepmother, my wife, has any less love or less affection or less motherly connection to those children. But I find it, in the context of a political fundraising letter, kind of manipulative, considering the fact that there's probably some, well, as Rush Limbaugh referred to them, low information voters out there reading this. And they might appreciate the context a little clearer for Jill Biden to refer to Bo as her stepson and herself as his stepmother. That said, she goes on in the letter, May 30th is a day forever etched in our hearts. It shattered me. It shattered our family. So many of you know that feeling after you lose a loved one, where you feel like you can't get off the floor. What helped me and what helped Joe was to find purpose. And that's what keeps Joe going, serving you and the country we love. Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing Jill Biden, the First Lady of the United States, exploiting the death of her stepson to raise money for their political campaign. So spare me the faux outrage, Joe. How dare he bring that up? How dare he? You're using your son to raise money. Gone forever. Thank God now, hopefully, gone forever is this lie, this fake fraudulent notion that Joe is a good old Uncle Joe. Oh, he's just a kindly old guy who comes and hangs out. No, he's been a jerk from day one in the Senate. Go back and look at his speeches on the floor back in the 70s. Go look at when he ran for president and he started shouting at reporters back then. Go back and ask the family of the late Judge Robert Bork what a kindly guy Joe Biden is. Ask Clarence Thomas and his wife and their family about what a kindly guy Joe Biden is. You can ask Mitt Romney, who Joe Biden called a racist when he was running against him in 2012. This guy has never been a nice guy. And finally, we're now hearing about how he rages behind the scenes because he's always been this way. Ask anyone who worked with him in the Senate. This has always been the book on Joe Biden. And that's one thing. Listen, domestically, politically, he's a jerk behind the scenes, whatever. He treats staffers poorly, whatever. I mean, that's the tale as old as time in Washington, D.C. But now this guy is president of the United States. And not only is he quietly raging against his staff, but he's also doing it with our allies. The most concerning story over the weekend with regard to Joe Biden's temper and his out-of-control raging and histrionics had to do with what he apparently is saying about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is fighting for the survival of his nation, survival of the Israeli people, facing a massacre at the hands of the Hamas terrorists right on his doorstep. Joe Biden from the beginning publicly has been pretending like he supports Israel, but behind the scenes, he's been trying to keep Benjamin Netanyahu from doing his job. He's been trying to keep him from protecting the people of Israel. And now this story breaks over the weekend. Biden disparages Netanyahu in private. How dare he? How dare he disparage a man who is conducting a war protecting his border? Joe Biden should try protecting his border once in a while. And if you scroll down into the article, you'll see very quickly exactly what kind of language he uses for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In at least 3 recent instances, Biden has called Netanyahu an asshole, according to 3 of the people directly familiar with his comments. He's calling Netanyahu an a-hole. Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who has forgotten more about defending his nation and fighting in a war than Joe Biden will ever know. He calls him an a-hole. I'm sorry. What exactly would Joe Biden have Benjamin Netanyahu do? He is literally facing an existential threat to his entire population and to the existence of his country. And because he's actually waging an effective war going after terrorists, Joe Biden has the nerve to behind the scenes refer to him like that. What a despicable human being he is. But none of us should be surprised at this. I mean, calling Benjamin Netanyahu an a-hole behind the scenes, lashing out at reporters after the special prosecutor accurately describes his memory loss and his cognitive abilities as being less than able to defend himself in court, therefore obviously less than able to conduct the affairs of our nation. None of this, frankly, should be a surprise to us. Look at how his temper has flared in the past with reporters in press conference for merely asking simple questions that he doesn't feel prepared to answer.
One more, sir. You campaigned and you ran on a return to civility. And I know that you dispute the characterization that you called folks who would oppose those voting bills as being Bull Connor or George Wallace, but you said that they would be sort of in the same camp.
No, I didn't say that. Look what I said. Go back and read what I said and tell me if you think I called anyone who voted on the side of the position taken by Bull Connor that they were Bull Connor. And that is an interesting reading of English. I assume you got in the journalism because you like to write.
So did you expect that would work with Senators Manchin or Sinema?
No, here's the thing. There's certain things that are so consequential. You have to speak from your heart as well as your head.
Look at the rage just behind the eyes, the seething, gritted teeth, the condescension, the patronizing attitude. And by the way, I never said anyone who voted like this with Bull Connor was actually the same as, but actually that's exactly what he does all the time. He's done it with you. If you dare to support Donald Trump, you're a fascist. You're undermining our Constitution. You're undermining our democratic process. You're an enemy of our country, right? MAGA fascists, MAGA extremists, MAGA this, MAGA that. It's what he constantly does. In fact, just last week with regard to Donald Trump, he was screaming and shouting in a rage again. This time, once again, repeating a lie about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, when he was commander-in-chief, refused to visit a cemetery, U.S. cemetery outside of Paris for fallen American soldiers. And he referred to those heroes, and I quote, as suckers and losers. He actually said that. He said that. How dare he?
Look at him. This is the guy. This is the man. And this is the progression that we've seen over the years. I mean, sure, it was cute and funny when he was challenging voters to push-ups when he was running for office, right? Who dared to challenge him. Remember when he would get in their face and he'd point the finger and he'd start shouting like that? What is going on here? Well, our friends over at the Free Beacon have an idea. They've talked to some doctors, some scientists, some medical personnel, and they've sort of highlighted exactly in this headline what we're seeing before our very eyes. Brain rage. Biden's violent temper, a common symptom of dementia and Alzheimer's. Tantrum so bad, some staffers try to avoid meeting alone with him. I mean, listen, ever since the Tara Reade story, I think that every woman in the White House should avoid meeting alone with him. And frankly, half of the men probably too, considering some of the stories the Secret Service tell about him. The point is, What we're hearing now about his rage behind the scenes is exactly what doctors look for with advanced cases of Alzheimer's. And anybody who has a loved one who suffered from Alzheimer's and dementia, they know this is the case. The temper gets worse and worse and worse. They have a short fuse. It's because they're frustrated because their brains don't work anymore. In any other case, we'd all feel sorry for Joe Biden, except for the fact that he's the president of the United States. And he insists on directing that rage and that anger at you and the candidate that you'd like to vote for instead of Joe Biden. Well, and, of course, to our allies across the seas. Last I checked, it's kind of a faux pas internationally and diplomatically for the president of the United States to call our allies words like asshole. But maybe you should check that once in a while. We wouldn't want him to start World War III, would we? Over the weekend, there was a shooting in Houston. It took place at the church, the Lakewood Church of Joel Osteen, the very popular television evangelist. And I'm wondering if you saw anything about it, because it sure didn't get much coverage. I mean, you would think in Texas, Texas, all those right-wing, crazy Republican, conservative, gun-toting, gun-loving Americans at a church, right? Joel Osteen's church. And there's a mass shooting. Why didn't you hear much about it? Well, we turn now to the chief of the Houston police, who will tell you exactly why you didn't hear anything about it.
So approximately at 1:53 p.m., a female, approximately 30, 35 years old, entered the property on the west side here in the parking lot of Lakewood Church. She entered the building. She was armed with a long rifle and a trench coat with a backpack, accompanied by a small child, approximately 4 to 5 years old. Once she entered, at some point she began to fire. I want to compliment the off-duty officers who were working extra employment here. One TABC agent, 4 years of service, 38 years old. An HPD off-duty officer, 28 years old, 2 years of service. Both officers, officer and agent, engaged, striking the female. She's deceased here on the scene. Unfortunately, the 5-year-old kid was hit and is in critical condition at our local hospital. There was a 57-year-old man who didn't have anything to do with it, I don't think, was shot in the leg. He's seeking treatment in the hospital. So let's all pray for each and every one of them. Once she went down, officers reported back to us that she threatened, that she had a bomb. So we searched her vehicle, our bomb squad, and also the backpack. No explosives were found, but she was also spraying some type of substance on the ground. So HFD came and the fire chief would speak briefly on that. But again, we're going to stand strong.
All right. Yeah, an unbelievable story out of Houston there. This is Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church. And again, as the police chief just painted the picture, a woman walks in, trench coat, backpack, rifle, and using a 5-year-old child as basically a human shield, starts shooting. And 2 off-duty police officers making some extra coin there on the side as armed security guards at the church immediately engage the shooter, defend all of the innocent people at the church, and they shoot this maniac dead. 2 good guys with guns stop the bad guy with the gun. This church, Joel Osteen's Lakeside Church, not a gun-free zone. Good guys can have guns there in Texas to defend the place, and they did. And that's why you didn't hear much about this. That's a big part of why you didn't hear much about this. Why don't we want this in our schools? Off-duty cops, retired military, give them a job, give them a purpose, protect the children. Not only will this end mass shootings in schools before they even happen, I bet. as soon as we announce that this is now the public policy in government-run schools, these shootings will stop. Nobody's going to want to try this. So that's a big part of why you haven't heard anything about this story. A huge part. Number one, because thankfully, innocent people weren't killed by this crazed maniac. But number two, because the narrative is if you've got trained people with guns in a soft target like this, they will stop the horrible event from happening, or at least prevent the horrible event from getting too horrible. That's part of why you're not hearing about this story, because good guys with guns actually came out the heroes. But there's also another reason why you haven't heard it. You just heard the description of the murderer or the attempted murderer, a woman in a trench coat with a backpack and a rifle. Well, now we have a reporter from KHOU down there delving into this shooter and finding out more information about the background. And you can see, per law enforcement records, Moreno, that's the last name of the person, also had identified as Jeffrey Escalante in the past and had prior arrests for assault, forgery, marijuana possession, theft, evading, and unlawful carrying weapon. Well, hold on a minute. You just heard from the police chief that this was a woman. But this woman was identifying as Jeffrey Escalante? Are you telling me? Yeah, that's exactly what they're telling you. This was a trans individual, apparently. Sarah Gonzalez, also down there in Texas, got the mug sheet on this person. Identified as transgender, went by the name Jeffrey, but the legal name is Genesee Moreno. You can see right there, Jeffrey Escalante Moreno is the booking ID. Various different names here, but there's the picture of Jeffrey. And you can see sex identified as female. If you keep going, we found other pictures here, or I should say Sarah Gonzalez found other mugshots and pictures of this person. That's what Jeffrey looked like for many of Jeffrey's arrests. But Jeffrey clearly is a woman and identified as a man. Genesee identified as Jeffrey. So this is a transgender individual who now has taken on a violent rampage and attempted to kill as many people as possible. And you heard, as she was lying, bleeding out on the floor, claimed that she had a bomb so she could blow up as many innocent people at this church as well, which was a bluff. She didn't have a bomb. But you've got... why haven't you seen this on cable news? Why haven't you seen this story on broadcast news? Why haven't you seen this in the New York Times or the Washington Post? Let's reaffirm exactly what we're talking about here. A crazed transgender maniac attempted to kill as many Christians attending a church service as possible and was only prevented from doing so because two off-duty police officers were armed security guards there and shot her before she could kill innocent Christians. That's the story, and that's the last thing the mainstream media wants you to see. And our friends over at Libs of TikTok did a quick breakdown here because just in the last year and a half, we've had mass shooting events perpetrated by transgendered individuals. Colorado Springs shooter identified as non-binary. Nashville school shooter identified as trans. The Aberdeen shooter identified as trans. The Denver school shooter identified as trans. Iowa school shooter, transgender fluid. And now the Lakewood church shooter identified as trans. Those stories, those mass shooting events all have two things in common, actually. The assailant was transgender or gender fluid or non-binary. That's one thing they had in common. The second thing, the story disappeared after just a few hours of coverage. We didn't get the ongoing hand-wringing, oh, we've got to have more, oh, we're going to have a panel discussion about it later tonight. We're going to have doctors and scientists come in and explain about this mass shooting epidemic that we've got in this country. We've got to have calls for more, precautions and look out for these people or those people. No, because they only have that analysis and they only have that hand-wringing and we only have that outrage on mainstream media when the murderer can be identified as a white male, usually Christian. Oftentimes they do whatever they can to figure out what the voting record was, so it can be a white Christian conservative male. Then they've got, then they're hitting for the cycle. And then you see story after story after story after story. Because as you know, the most dangerous domestic terrorist we've got is a white male conservative, usually racist, but that just sort of gets baked into the cake, right? They don't even have to say racist anymore. Of course. That's the coverage you would normally see. But for these multiple instances just in the last year and a half of mass shooting events perpetrated by a transgender individual, the story goes away. Nothing to see here. There's nothing in common. There's no concerns. I mean, maybe, just maybe, somebody who is so uncomfortable in their own skin and their own body that God gave them that they want to identify as the opposite sex, that they want to change their clothing, change their appearance, change their name, change their identity, in some cases even use pharmaceuticals or surgery to physically alter their body and lop off perfectly healthy sexual organs, or take pharmaceuticals to completely rearrange internally their body. Maybe people who will go to those great lengths and do all of those things, they might have some psychological issues that deserve some attention. Maybe those people have a lot going on there inside their head that then leads them to do something horrible and radical like this. But no, we're told if you don't affirm and you don't go along with them, you're going to force them into suicide. Maybe somebody who's that mentally fragile is also on the brink of a mass murder. Maybe we as a society better start looking at these things a little more seriously. Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, appeared on Meet the Press this weekend. And I got to give Kristen Welker a little bit of credit here. She actually stumbled into some real live journalism by asking a very important question that Alejandro Mayorkas, of course, brushed off. But you should at least see it.
You have now been in your position for 3 years, and let's talk about what's happened during those 3 years. More migrants have crossed the border illegally last year than ever before. The asylum cases backlog has more than tripled since 2019. You yourself have said that more than 85% of migrants caught crossing the border illegally are being released into the U.S. as they await their court dates. Let's just put impeachment aside for a minute. Why do you deserve to keep your job, Mr. Secretary?
Kristen, the data that you cite is a powerful example of why we need legislation to fix what everyone agrees is a broken immigration system.
You have.
Well, first of all, kudos to her for asking the question. Why do you deserve to keep your job? You have failed. You are a failure, sir. Your job, it's right there in the name. Secretary of Homeland Security, and you are not securing the homeland. Add on to that the fact that you have lied under oath about it. Why should you keep your job? But Mayorkas just did something that I really need you to clue in on here, because they do it every single time. Every single time anyone from the Biden administration or any of their lackey apologists in the House of Representatives, the Senate, or for that matter, in the media, whenever they're challenged on the obvious fact that our border is completely wide open. There is no security there. Millions of people have flooded across illegally, unvetted. We have no idea who they are and what their intentions are. Anytime you challenge them on the fact that you have left our border insecure, completely full of chaotic chaos, it's in crisis mode. Whenever you challenge them on border security, what do? They immediately say, wow, we have a broken immigration system. They pivot the question. They do it on purpose, and most journalists allow them to get away with it. You see, here's the key here. You can have a broken immigration system and still secure your border. For Mayorkas to sit up there and say, well, this is why I need new laws. I can't possibly do my job without any new laws. It's funny. Every time he's been asked about the border for the last 3 years, he hasn't said, well, it's not secure. I'd love to secure the border, but I can't, because you guys haven't passed any laws to secure the border. No, there are plenty of laws out there for border security. They were enacted and supported and enforced by Donald Trump. They were actually, enacted years ago. Donald Trump didn't pass any new laws about securing the border. He just enforced them. Mayorkas has ignored them. And by the way, he's ignored them at the behest of his boss, the president of the United States. Everybody who wants to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas over his failure to secure the border, they should probably look at his boss, because he's carrying out the exact policy Joe Biden wants. But the difference is Mayorkas has lied under oath about it, and he deserves to go. Here's a little bit more from this Meet the Press interview.
No doubt there is gridlock on Congress, but do you bear responsibility for what is happening at the border, what the president himself has called a crisis?
It certainly is a crisis, and well, we don't bear responsibility for a broken system, and we're doing a tremendous amount within that broken system. But fundamentally, Congress is the only one who can fix it.
Well, it's just not true, and you know that. And I would love for Kristen Welker to say, be specific. What is it exactly you want Congress to do here? Because the answer is pathway to citizenship. They want to give them all amnesty, and they want everybody who has come into this country illegally to have a green card and then to have citizenship so they can vote, right? That's exactly what's happening here. Everything that was in that bill that the Democrats and the Biden administration pushed for, it all ends up being a pathway to citizenship. We'll prove that to you in just a moment, because they're now using a new euphemism. Oh, no. We don't want amnesty. We don't want pathway to citizenship. We just want to be able to grant asylum. Asylum. It sounds nice, doesn't it? These are people who are in crisis. They need asylum. They need sanctuary, and we're going to provide it for them. But that translates directly into getting citizenship. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, a little bit more from Mayorkas and how baldly he lied to the media. And he's been lying to you, the American people, for years now.
Mr. Secretary, why doesn't the president just shut down the border and let the courts just try to stop him?
Well, the fact of the matter, Kristen, is that we have taken executive actions already. We continuously review what options are available to us, but those are always challenged in the courts.
Okay, so surprise, surprise, he lied again. They haven't taken any executive actions having to do with the border other than to take executive actions off the table that had been put in place by Donald Trump on the border. Any executive actions that Joe Biden and his administration has taken having to do with the border actually makes it easier for people to enter our country. Their executive actions has been to remove the Remain in Mexico policy. The executive action has been to reorient the asylum process. So instead of asking for asylum in your own country, you come here, ask for asylum, boom, you get a summons, you get to come into the country, you get a flight, you get benefits, you get health care, you get whatever you want. And, you'll have your hearing for asylum in about 7 or 8 years. That's the executive action they've taken. And this whole bogus notion that, well, if we did anything like that, we'd see court action. No, they wouldn't. Because it's their pals, actually, that they take executive action. Right? It's their pals who have taken Trump to court. Trump didn't mind being taken to court, by the way. He signed executive actions. They said, well, Mr. President, this is going to get challenged in court. Good. Go ahead. Challenge it in court. And he fought those fights. If Biden wanted to shut down the border, he could have done the same thing, but he didn't. The only actions that this administration has taken that have seen challenges in court is the actions that have undermined the border. And yeah, they're seeing action in court because you've got attorneys general in Virginia and Texas and Louisiana and Missouri, Republicans who are saying, you're killing us here. We're going to sue you because your executive actions have freed up the border. Where the hell is Kristen Welker at Meet the Press to know the facts involved here and actually challenge this guy? Meanwhile, one man did have the facts at his disposal this weekend, Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida. He was on with Jake Tapper, and he was talking about this very notion I just alluded to, the fact that the asylum process is a pathway to citizenship. Watch what happens when Jake Tapper tries to fact check Marco Rubio.
The bill basically creates an asylum corps. Okay, it creates a bunch of thousands of bureaucrats, basically agents, asylum agents, that would be empowered right at the border to either allow people into the country with an immediate work permit. Today they got to wait 6 months. You give them an immediate work permit, you're going to have more people coming. That's a huge magnet. Or they have the power to immediately release them and grant them asylum.
All right. There's more to this in a moment because, like I said, Jake Tapper is going to try to jump in and pretend that Marco Rubio is lying. But did you hear what he just said with regard to the border bill that they keep saying was, oh, I can't believe Republicans killed the border bill. Right now, if you enter this country illegally, you wait 6 months and then you get a work permit. Now, first of all, that's an outrage. You come to this country illegally, you should not be able to work, let alone wait 6 months and then be able to work. That's an outrage. So already that's a problem. But this bill that the Democrats pushed down the throats or attempted to push down the throats of Republicans that sadly James Langford and Mitch McConnell were totally happy with, and Susan Collins and Mitt Romney were totally happy with, it would have eliminated the 6-month waiting period. You enter the country illegally and boom, welcome aboard. Here's your work permit. You freaking kidding me? How many more people are going to try to come into the country if that were to be the law? Well, thankfully, though, our economy is so strong that we can sustain all these people coming in and driving down wages as brand new legal cheap labor. That's insane. But then, as you just heard, Marco Rubio said this would put them on a 5-year plan to citizenship as soon as they applied for asylum. Now, watch what happens here when Jake Tapper tries to be Mr. Smarty Pants with the smart guy glasses. This is the real-time fact-checking that only Marco Rubio has to deal with from people like Jake Tapper. Alejandro Mayorkas never gets any real-time fact-checking from Kristen Welker over there at Meet the Press. But watch the real-time fact-checking from Jake Tapper.
Which now puts them on a 5-year path to citizenship, which is what a lot of Democrats want. They want to turn a bunch of illegal immigrants into citizens, into voters, in the hopes that those people will then turn around and vote for them in future elections, grateful because they'll know who let them in. That's a huge problem. That doesn't solve the border. It makes it worse.
This doesn't provide a path to citizenship for any of these people, just to clarify. But it raises...
Yes, it does. Absolutely it does. No, yes, it does. When you have asylum, you are on a path to citizenship. When you get asylum, you are a year away from a green card and 4 years away from citizenship. Absolutely, it does.
But you said you approved of the asylum
have the power to grant you asylum. Not even a judge, a bureaucrat.
That's right. This is so critically important, and well done, Marco Rubio, for doing that. That's smarmy, obnoxious Jake Tapper. They always do it this way with the Republican. This has nothing to do with a pathway to citizenship. I want to make sure that our viewers understand the facts because I alone have a handle on the facts. No. Absolutely, that's not true. Just because Democrats told him, we took pathway to citizenship off the table, Jake Tapper believed that. He didn't read this bill. He didn't see what was in it. Marco Rubio did. They've just rebranded pathway to citizenship. See, for 20 years now, Democrats have been pushing for this. They always say, our immigration system is broken and we've been trying forever, but those Republicans won't let us. Right, because Republicans have stopped short of giving amnesty and a pathway to citizenship because it rewards people who have come into this country illegally and stayed in this country illegally. And it penalizes the people who are trying to follow the law, right? So Democrats continue to want amnesty and then a pathway to citizenship. Republicans ultimately say no, and we're at a standoff. So now Democrats, instead of changing their mind and changing their policy and recognizing that that's wrong, all they've done is gone through a rebranding process. They're just marketing it in a different way. Okay, fine. We won't ask for amnesty and we won't ask for a pathway to citizenship. Let's just expand our asylum policies. Well, that sounds better, doesn't it? Asylum sounds great. Who doesn't want to give people asylum who need it? Well, let's dig a little deeper into that asylum policy. In 1 year, you get a green card. And 4 years after that, you get citizenship. Maybe it's me, but that sounds a lot like amnesty and a pathway to citizenship. And Jake Tapper didn't bother to have the facts at his disposal. Good on Marco Rubio for doing it. Now, if you watched the Super Bowl on Sunday, you were probably surprised to see a whole lot of Jesus going on. Now, we're used to athletes crossing themselves and kissing their crucifix and thanking God when they score a touchdown. And when they win an MVP like we saw from Patrick Mahomes, he says, you know what? This isn't about glorifying me. All glory to God. And I like that. That's a cool thing. It is. And it's honestly a wonderful thing. But what we're not used to seeing is all of the Jesus and talk of God during the commercials. Here's one commercial that got a lot of attention. It's from a group called He Gets Us. Let's take a watch. All right, there you go. And I'm sure you've seen that message by now. If you haven't, I'm glad we were able to bring it to you. And by the way, the group, He Gets Us, they tweeted out their video on social media, on X, and they added this message to it. Take a look. It says, Jesus washed the feet of friends and enemies. No ego or hate. He humbly loved his neighbors. How can we do the same? Jesus washed the feet of friends and enemies. That's just not true. I'm sorry. It's just not true. I know that I'm sure their hearts are in the right place. Actually, I'm not so sure about that. And I'm sure that this message actually resonated with a lot of people as they saw it. Oh, that's true. Isn't love thy neighbor and love thy enemy a message that we need to hear right now? And shouldn't we all be coming together? And listen, I don't disagree with that. That is partly what Jesus taught. He did preach that we should love our enemy as well as loving our neighbor. Actually, it all starts, though, with loving God, doesn't it? Love God and love your neighbor. And you can show that you love God by loving your neighbor. Absolutely fantastic and important to say. But they took it kind of an extra step. They sort of politicized it, didn't they? Let's start with the whole Jesus washed the feet of his enemies thing. He didn't. The Bible recounts that Jesus washed the feet of his apostles on the evening of the Last Supper on Holy Thursday. When he did that, he was instituting the church. He actually instituted the priesthood by washing the feet of his disciples. And that's kind of an important distinction. In fact, there's some debate about this, but most people believe that Judas had already left the room and headed out to get the Pharisees to sort of blow the whistle on Jesus and turn him in, right? So even Judas didn't get his feet washed. To say that he washed the feet of his enemies is a complete and total distortion of the gospel. Also, did you notice something about all of the images at play here? Let's just keep it running in the background here, because almost entirely the people who are administering the washing, here's a police officer with a young black man. Here's sort of a blonde sorority girl washing the feet of sort of an edgy looking girl. Here's a white man in the West washing the feet of what appears to be a Native American. Here's a woman washing the feet of a young girl outside an abortion clinic, right? With protesters in the background. I'm not sure what this image is supposed. Oh, I think it's an alcoholic woman. I'll be fine with that. Here's a dude working on an oil rig, washing the feet of, you see, Clean Air Now. It's an environmental protester. You see what we're getting at here? Do you see the common theme here? This looks to be an American woman washing the feet of visibly a practicing Muslim, right? Common theme here. Do you notice who's not getting their feet washed? Oh, this one is my favorite. Member of the clergy washing the feet of what appears to be a transgendered individual there on the beach in California. Have you noticed who's not getting their feet washed? I'm not seeing, a white MAGA hat wearing, outwardly, visible conservative dude getting his feet washed. I'm not seeing, by the way, a religious person, a Christian person getting their feet washed. It's only the Christians who are being called to do the feet washing, which I suppose is the message from a Christian group that we Christians have to do better. We have to rise up and really, really step up and do better in this society. But again, to spread Jesus's word out there as washing the feet of his enemies as they did, without actually adding any other context of the gospel. Like, if you love me, you will obey my Father's laws. See, that was also part of the gospel, wasn't it? Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. That also wasn't part of the message that we heard, but that's certainly part of the gospel, right? This is an offensive attempt to actually put Christians in the defensive, put them back on their heels, and make them the problem in our society. And listen, I recognize that Christians are called for humility. Christians are always called to strive better and to do better, because guess what? We all fall short of the glory of God. That's the whole point of the gospel. The difference is we are constantly trying to achieve that perfection because Jesus asked us to, even if we can't. It's all about trying and trying to live up to the perfection that Jesus put forth on this planet in his mere existence and what is described in the Gospels. To just say that it's our job to cater to everyone who disagrees with us despite their sin and not point out the fact that we have to repent from our sinful nature, well, we're sort of missing the most important part of the gospel, aren't we? Which brings us to a different ad that played during the Super Bowl. This one from the prayer app, the Catholic prayer app, Hallow. Take a look.
God, we take this moment just to give you thanks. We thank you for this time to come together as a family, as friends, and as a country. Help us, Lord, especially this Lent, to grow closer to you. Amen.
Join us in prayer this Lent on Hallow. Stay prayed up.
That's right. That is Mark Wahlberg, and he's sending the right gospel message, in my opinion. He, along with Jonathan Romy, the actor who plays Jesus in The Chosen, that's unifying. That's actually asking us to come together and asking God's help, asking the help of Jesus Christ for us to be better and bring us together. You see, the whole point is not that Jesus gets us. Of course, Jesus gets us. Jesus is God. He's omniscient. Of course, he's all-knowing. It's sort of obvious that Jesus gets us. That's not the point here. The point is that we need to get Jesus in every sense of the word, right? We need to get him in our life, but we also need to get him, like, understand him. It's gratuitous and infantile to spend a bunch of time saying, it's okay, we don't care who you are and what's going on in your life and what kind of sin you are, because Jesus gets you. Of course Jesus gets you. The more important thing is, have you gotten Jesus? And this ad, frankly, well, that's the real Jesus ad. Sadly, the woke divisions at the Super Bowl didn't end with the invocation of Jesus during the ads. Beforehand, we had to suffer again through the so-called Black national anthem. All right, so a couple things here. I mean, it would be gratuitous to pile on here, but the fact is there's no such thing as a Black national anthem. Even the notion of calling something a Black national anthem suggests that the actual national anthem isn't for Black people. It's just for white people or non-Black people or whatever it is they're trying to do here. Again, the national anthem is a moment of unity. It's a moment for all of us to celebrate that one thing we have in common, which is our country, our flag, our patriotism, our ideals. And by presenting the Black national anthem, we are now forcing a division along the most insignificant thing, too, skin color, something that we have absolutely no control over. But strangely, this doesn't have to be this way. You see, we also had America the Beautiful performed right before the Star Spangled Banner, right? America the Beautiful was performed. It was great. And nobody said, and now our alternative national anthem. Nobody announced it by saying, and now the white national anthem or the Christian national anthem. No, nobody. They just said, okay, and now we're going to sing America the Beautiful. See, if you actually look at the lyrics of this so-called Black national anthem, It's actually something that we should be able to get behind. Did you know that Lift Every Voice and Sing, the so-called Black national anthem, is actually a Christian hymn? It's a spiritual that was sung by enslaved Africans during slavery in this country that actually raised their hopes for freedom someday, and they were asking and praying to God for that freedom. How is that not something we can get behind? Here's the lyrics of the first verse. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Amen. Amen. Listen, if the NFL really did want to unify us, if they really wanted to send a message of hope, then they would absolutely perform this song. And let me be clear, 80%, 85% of the players in the NFL are Black. And this song makes them feel good. It pumps them up before the game, I'm told. Okay, that's fine. If you as Black players of the NFL are asking the league and the networks to perform this song, go ahead. Let's do it. I can actually hold hands and sing every single one of those words with you. And we can all unite behind that sentiment. You lose me when you call it the Black national anthem. You don't have to call it anything. Just like we didn't call America the Beautiful anything, or God Bless America anything other than the title of the song. Stop with the Black national anthem thing, which is already divisive, and instead just say, now let's all join in singing Lift Every Song. Now listen, we're adding a whole lot of songs to the pregame, and it makes a long night even that much longer. But if the intention was to unite and inspire and lift spirits, that's all they'd have to do. Stop calling it the Black national anthem, and we'll get behind those words. We'll sing along, for God's sake. I say if that's the intention, because clearly that's not the intention. The intention is to divide. The intention here is to draw us apart politically and racially, sadly. If they truly did believe in unifying, then they drop the Black national anthem. But they're not gonna. And that should tell you everything you need to know. Let's get back to Biden here real fast, because the issue of his age now continues to loom after that devastating report last week. Now, first, I want you to see Joe Biden back in 2018. So this is Joe Biden just 6 years ago, with a one-on-one interview with Norah O'Donnell. And she raises the question of his age. There's two things to look for here. Exactly what he says in response to whether his age is a legitimate issue, but also look at how quickly he's deteriorated in just 6 years. This was 2018. Watch.
Is age a legitimate issue?
It is a legitimate issue. Sure it is. And I think people are going to judge it. If I were to run, I think they're going to judge me on my vitality. Can I still run up the steps of Air Force Two? Am I still in good shape? Do I have all my faculties? Am I energetic? I think it's totally legitimate for people to ask those questions.
Okay, good, because we are asking those questions. Did you notice how lucid he seemed? How able to speak he was? I mean, that's impressive, actually, for 6 years ago. But boy, look at him now. But let's take this point by point.
Sure it is. And I think people are going to judge it. If I were to run, I think they're going to judge me on my vitality.
Well, judge him on his vitality. Have you seen him lately? Have you seen him barely be able to get up across the stage and not be able to find where to leave the stage? Have you seen him lose his train of thought and fumble for words in mid-sentence during an appearance? Have you ever seen him be able to respond to questions, deal with an interview, or give any remarks without the benefit of cue cards in his hands or a teleprompter? Have you? All right. Let's also take him at his word back in 2018.
Can I still run up the steps of Air Force Two?
Oh, my gosh. Run up the steps. Well, first of all, they're using the little baby steps, aren't they? They don't even let him go on the big steps. Run up. He can barely walk up those steps.
Still in good shape? Do I have all my faculties?
Yeah. Does he have all his faculties? Listen, this is back in 2018 when it was 2 years before Election Day. And he was saying, absolutely, it's a completely fair issue. Well, it's funny because these days, if you dare to raise this question, you're called ageist. You're called, how dare you even raise this question? Look at Robert Hur for specifically raising those issues in the special prosecutor's report, and they're ripping him a new one. Hillary Clinton, in that interview last week with Alex Wagner, she was asked about this as well. Sorry, there's music under this. I think MSNBC decided to make this more dramatic.
X factor in all of this, the thing that we keep seeing in poll after poll after poll is concern about Biden's age. Full stop. What should he do on this? Is it a matter of sort of like underscoring his boundless energy, or should he embrace his 8 decades on Earth and the great wisdom he's gained?
I love the propaganda here, where Alex Wagner's question is completely framed with, how can he possibly spin out of this? What's your suggestion? Nowhere on the table was the option of, is he too old? Has he lost it? I mean, should he not be the nominee? Should he step down from the presidency now? Right? Nowhere in there is that even a notion. It's just how should he do it? Should he embrace the 8 decades he's been on the planet? Watch Hillary Clinton's answer, though.
Through all of this. I mean, do you have the above? All of the above. I mean, I talk to people in the White House all the time, and they know it's an issue. But as I like to say, look, it's a legitimate issue. It's a legitimate issue for Trump, who's only 3 years younger, right? So it's an issue. Once you say that, then you have to also talk about what's at stake in the election. And I'm for Joe Biden for re-election on the merits, because I think he's done a really good job.
Yeah, she would think he's done a real good job. By the way, what's with her talk? I've talked to people at the White House all the time. Why is she's a former Secretary of State, a failed presidential candidate, and a grifter who runs a foundation. Why is she on the phone with the White House all the time? That should raise some concerns. And it's important that she pointed out, that Trump's only 3 years younger. Does Trump seem 3 years younger? Or does Trump seem, 13 years younger? Or maybe 20 years younger? Meanwhile, over at MSNBC, they really took up the issue of the age. And I just want to pause here for a minute, because suddenly this whole conversation is about Joe Biden's age. Joe Biden's age. Joe Biden's age. Honestly, it's not his age. It's his competency or lack thereof. That's the problem. I mean, I have no doubt there could very well be an 81-year-old out there who is completely capable of being president of the United States, probably many of them. In fact, in 3 years, we'll see how Donald Trump is doing as an 81-year-old. No, the problem here is Joe Biden is mentally deficient. You don't have to be 81 to have these kind of breakdowns in your brain. But all they want to do is talk about the age, and there's a reason for that. They're trying to make him a sympathetic character, and they're trying to get elderly voters to rally to his side. Okay, that's what's happening here. Watch the MSNBC conversation.
Along with the standardness of, I don't recall, is the standardness of prosecutors and or litigators being annoyed by it. And part of the peak that you read in it is that peak, right? I mean, he's frustrated and angry that he didn't get more. Yeah. But the other thing, you mentioned this, we should just be clear here, right? Like, age is the central narrative question here that this all revolves around in terms of its political repercussions, the way the news happened today, the questions being asked him by multiple figures there. And in the end, what makes it such a useful political tool for people that want Donald Trump to be elected or want him not to be reelected is that the fact of his age is not something you can rebut. Mm-hmm. You can't tack to, if someone says you're too far left, you can tack to the center. The man is 80 years old.
He rides a bike.
He is the age he is. And so it's a very useful political attack for that reason.
I'm sorry. He rides a bike? Was that, and again, nobody's questioning whether he can stay up on a bike, right? I mean, we all know he can ride a bike. Oh, well, this is awkward. Thanks, Rachel. he can ride a bike. What an embarrassment. Meanwhile, there were 2 points of defense that the liars for the White House and for the Democratic Party used this weekend. The first was to defend against Biden's age, which, again, no one's saying he's too old. We're saying he's too incompetent. There's a difference. But then the other was to lie about the actual merits of the case, the documents, which, again, I want to be clear here. Joe Biden, according to the special prosecutors, stole classified information with national security secrets, stole them from the United States Senate. He did not have the right to have those documents outside of a SCIF in the Capitol. He stole the documents and then held on to them for upwards to 20 years. He misused them, mishandled the stolen documents, and then shared classified top secret information with people who should not have seen it. Okay? That's what the prosecutor found. And the only reason he is not inside a courtroom right now, well, there's 3 reasons. Number 1, he's president, and you'd have to wait until after he's president to press charges. Number 2, he's too old and feeble and senile, and the prosecutor found that a jury wouldn't convict him. And number 3, he's a Democrat. But they still needed to do damage control. So here we go with Face the Nation.
For those who see this as unequal justice, like, how do you respond?
Well, I think this week was a really good indication of how the Justice Department acts as independently as it does. We heard earlier that clearly the Biden administration is not happy with the release of the Hur report on the investigation. And if they really had as much power over the Justice Department as former President Trump alleges, that wouldn't have been released. It clearly was. Also, I think ironically, we have to note that one of the 4 charges against former President Trump in D.C. is interference with the Justice Department. He was alleged to have interfered with the Justice Department, try to get them to investigate an election where everyone agreed there was no fraud and it was legitimate.
All right. Now, I just need to point out what just happened there and the very deceitful pivot. This is one of those guys that they put out there who's, this isn't a partisan. This is just a legal expert. But did you see what he did here? We are comparing the classified documents cases. All right. That's your apples to apples comparison. You've got Joe Biden, who as a senator should have never had these classified documents, and as a vice president could never have declassified these documents. He stole them from the Capitol. He should have never taken them with him, and he retained them for years after he was vice president and years after he was a senator, and he only cooperated after Trump was facing criminal charges after the FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago. Right? That's the only reason he cooperated. It's not like he voluntarily said, hey, we've got some documents here. No. The second that Mar-a-Lago raid happened with Donald Trump, I assure you, every single person in Washington, D.C. went into freak-out mode. And Biden said, well, oh my God, go through my boxes. As soon as we know what we've got, we got to let people know about it. Right? That's the only reason he cooperated. All right. But what this guy just did, he brought up charges that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor in D.C., has brought related to January 6th. He brought those up in comparison to Biden's document cases. Now, maybe he got confused because, let's face it, the law is being used as a political weapon against Donald Trump so many ways and in so many jurisdictions that it's hard to keep them straight. But if I can do it, so can the guy wearing a tie on Face the Nation who gets paid a lot more money than I do. He can do it too. So that's just deceitful. It's a lie what he did there. What you keep hearing from people over and over again is the difference between the Biden document case and the Donald Trump document case is Biden cooperated fully. That's a lie. He only cooperated after the Mar-a-Lago raid, number 1. And number 2, that's not the real difference. The difference is Donald Trump was a president and Joe Biden wasn't. He was a senator. He stole those documents. The other big difference is Joe Biden kept these in a torn up cardboard box in his garage. Donald Trump kept his documents in a secure office inside a secure compound at Mar-a-Lago that had constant Secret Service surveillance. So there is a big difference between the two. Joe Biden was sloppier and more deceitful with his classified documents, hundreds of classified documents. Donald Trump was responsible, kept them secure. Oh, and the other big difference, Donald Trump had to deal with an FBI raid with guns drawn and television cameras everywhere at the crack of dawn at Mar-a-Lago. Joe Biden never had to deal with that. I wonder why. Oh, that brings us to the other big difference in the two cases. Joe Biden's a Democrat, and Donald Trump is Donald Trump. But that didn't stop people from defending not just Joe Biden, but then going after the special prosecutor. Watch on MSNBC, where apparently now it's really cool to attack the Justice Department and claim that a special prosecutor is politically motivated.
Well, I will say that that there's no doubt in my mind that that this special prosecutor could have written the same report without using these words. Elderly man with a poor memory. I'm you know, like you, I'm a simple country journalist. I can find a lot of different, I can find a lot of different ways to say this.
Yeah, you know what?
Without
I'm a
saying
simple
something like
country
that.
lawyer.
So I love this. You know, there's way to say that without saying it like that. Hold on. Just so you know, the special prosecutor literally had to say something as to why they weren't going to bring charges. They couldn't say, we found that Joe Biden has willfully detained classified materials. He's violated this law, this law, this law, and this law, but we're not going to press charges. Okay, see you later. No, you got to give a reason. And the reason is, well, apparently the truth, which is he is mentally incompetent. And they're angry that the special prosecutor told the truth. Understand what you're seeing play out here. The media just assumes that people with the Justice Department are not going to go after Democrats. They're used to them going after Republicans, and now they're outraged that suddenly one of them hasn't followed the script, right? And so now they're going to go after him personally.
Yeah.
John, I'm a simple country lawyer, and I know. What's the headline? What should the headline from this report be? Not indicted.
Not guilty. Right.
Not the evidence to indict him. Yeah. It's not there. And the clear differences, as he wrote, between Trump and Biden. That should be.
And I would have thought, Joe.
Wait, hold on, John. Hold on, John. Do you think that this guy is so naive? You think this guy is so stupid? Do you guys think this guy is so clueless that he didn't know by putting words in that Donald Trump would love for him to put in there, that wasn't going to be the headline for the New York Post, that wouldn't be on every. The guy knew. He's a Trumper who knew.
Right.
So why in the world would the Justice Department allow that dicta to be in there? It's gratuitous.
Well,
he's a Trumper. Robert Hur is a Trumper. Now, did you know he was one of the investigators on Robert Mueller's Russian collusion hoax investigation? He's a Trumper. And it's amazing that he was never called a Trumper during this entire investigation, right up until the moment he put out that document. And now suddenly he's a Trumper. And these are the same people who if you dared to criticize James Comey or Christopher Wray or Robert Mueller during the Russian collusion hoax investigation, you were taking our Constitution and putting it in the shredder. You should be imprisoned. How dare you? How dare you undermine the Justice Department? How dare you even consider that a prosecutor in this country, a U.S. attorney, would in any way allow politics to affect his job? Oh, except in this case where it's a Trumper. And let me be clear here. He didn't press charges, and they're still angry. Because you see, from their perspective, they assume that a U.S. attorney sure is going to act politically, but they're going to be on our side. So it's okay, right? But dutifully, Kamala Harris 100% picked up the cue from MSNBC. A lot of people think that the media picks up their cues from the Democrats in power. Oftentimes, more often than not, it goes the other way. It's the people in power who are picking up the cues from the media and learning what they should be saying and what they should be doing. That's how this thing works, as Andrew Breitbart called it, the Democrat media complex. And so the next day, here's Kamala Harris picking up exactly where Morning Joe left off.
So the way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated. So
there you go. The special prosecutor is a liar and a political hack. Now, I just want to understand the logic here for a minute, because Robert Hur said that the evidence showed that Joe Biden stole classified top secret documents over decades, retained them illegally, willfully, and shared them illegally and willfully. And the only reason he's not bringing charges is because he's an old, demented, elderly dude, and a jury wouldn't convict him. He has no memory. He can't even remember when his son died. There's no possible way he can stand trial. Now everyone's pushing back on that and saying, how dare you? How dare you say that? His brain works perfectly. He's got a great memory. He's sharper as it. So if that's the case, are they telling us that, oh, okay, then let's bring this to trial? The only reason we're not pressing charges is because his brain doesn't work anymore. They're saying, oh, his brain works just fine. Okay, then let's take it to court. Let's press charges. Let's put him in the orange jumpsuit. Let's do the perp walk. Obviously, Kamala Harris is out there strutting around and trying to be loyal and daring to push back on the prosecutor because she's trying to show herself as the loyal Democrat who's going to stand by the president of the United States. But behind the scenes, Wall Street Journal, they're going to make sure that the notion is floated out there that Kamala Harris is ready to serve at a moment's notice. She has a capacity to lead. She's ready to go if needed. I could be wrong, but I think that will ensure that Joe Biden will not be impeached by the House of Representatives. All Kamala Harris has to do is show up out there and remind everybody, oh, God, forgot about her. That said, I do think that's where this is headed. I mean, right now, the Democrats have a decision to make. Are we going to continue with Joe Biden right up through November? After poll after poll after poll showing that not only is everyone terrified about Joe Biden being president today, let alone for 5 years from now. And Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden, not just nationally now by 5 points, but in every single battleground state. They have to weigh that possibility with the idea of Kamala Harris, as flawed as she may be and as terrifying as she may be. Kamala Harris could be running against Donald Trump this November as an incumbent, history-making black female president. And the Democrats have to weigh those two options. What do we have a better chance of winning with? Dilapidated, deteriorating, incapacitated Joe Biden, or flawed as she may be, history-making Kamala Harris? And I got a hunch they're going to go with her over him sooner rather than later. Listen, that's it for today's epic first-time live Rumble program. Thank you, everyone, for watching us live on Rumble. Tell a friend. Click, subscribe, get your alerts going. We'll be here daily at noon, live on Rumble. And then each one of these segments is going to be broken out across every Town Hall social media platform so you can share them, as well as right here on Rumble, by the way, so you can share them with all your friends and even a couple of your enemies. Thanks for watching. We'll be back. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.